I gotta get back while I can still see where I'm going. We're entering full-blown whiteout conditions right now. You can get turned around, lost bad in whiteout. There's been men perish within 50 yards of their cabins in whiteout. Right now I gotta get off this ice. It's just blinding out here.
I feel like no one wants to see me here. I think my favourite was the guy who basically stepped over me with so much change in his pocket, I could hear it jingling. I've been the guy probably with the jingling pocket of change that's walked straight past someone. I've been that guy. I feel like I'm even scaring people. When I just ask them politely for the time, they're scared. They're genuinely scared to tell me the time.
Oh, Lord.
You ready?
I'm ready.
You can do it.
He's gonna beat himself.
Be consistent, powerful, and then you just whip his ass.
I got it.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I got money on you too.
High five, high five.
Oh, yay. I love gamble, and I think it's the whole family too.
I got 100 on Washington.
Want to bet 20? I'm gonna bet 40. Just to beat the shit out of you. That's it. That's how we do. Doesn't matter. We don't even care the game. We don't even know the game. You talk about bet, we bet. That's the whole.
This series follows young adults on the autism spectrum.
An A-plus partner looks like me.
As they navigate the confusing world of relationships and dating.
Would you like to get married?
The course of true love never did run smooth.
Of course it doesn't.
Welcome to this Rockies Roundtable, where we've gathered a few of this year's outstanding nominees in the arts and entertainment stream to discuss their work. I'm your moderator, Kristen Maldonado, and joining me today is Ryan Pender, executive producer of Alone. Hey, Ryan, how are you? Jacob Hickey, writer and series producer of Filthy Rich and Homeless and the head of Factual Black Fella Films.
Hey, how you going?
Hello. KARINA Holden, executive producer of Love on the Spectrum. How you doing? And Nick Lee, executive producer of House of Ho. Thank you guys so much for being here today. How are you feeling?
Good. Thank you.
Great.
Awesome. Now, from surviving alone in the wilderness to finding love on the spectrum, learning about homelessness, to following the fabulous lives of the Ho family, these shows really introduce us to different lifestyles and experiences outside of many people's everyday lives. I'd love to hear from you guys what inspired each of these series. Maybe Ryan, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. I think Alone, lots of things, I think. I think we've gone down the road with a lot of unscripted that you feel the hand of the producer in there. And we wanted to do something that was a bit different, more of a Dick Prenneke kind of an idea where it's just fly on the wall, truly documented by themselves. And you kind of get the feel for what these folks are going through without a producer pulling the strings, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Definitely, that you feel that that feeling while they're out there. And it can be scary following along with their journeys. What about you, Jacob?
Well, look, we kind of, Blackfellow Films, we're always kind of looking for that show to tackle an issue that kind of either isn't being talked about or is being talked about in a way that might not be particularly helpful. And by that, I mean the way the media is talking about it. And homelessness is a huge problem in Australia, and it was a growing problem, and it just wasn't really getting the traction that it sort of deserved, and a social issue that deserved to be talked about. So when we came across that UK format, we thought we could take it and do something quite different with it from an Australian point of view. And as you say, really focus on homelessness and kind of allow the audience to live vicariously through 5 well-known people who would get what it feels like for 10 days and nights to kind of experience homelessness as best as we could manage. And yeah, it's the classic fish out of water, immersive obs doc series with a construct around it. So yeah, but really it was about talking about homelessness, talking about a big social issue that wasn't really being raised at that point in time, which is incredible when you think about it.
Absolutely. And what about you, KARINA?
So
We had previously made a series about people with disabilities and getting their first jobs, and looking at the issue of employment. And one of the things that consistently we came up across was a job's great, but a relationship would be even more great. And we were following characters, particularly characters who had autism, and we have in our teams the people with some lived experience also of ASD. And this idea of doing a dating show, a love show, that was for people who are genuinely going to engage in a very different way to what we often see when people make television about love and dating, which is lots of people who want to become famous and who are just putting it on for the cameras. And we knew that working with certain people, we would have a really heartwarming series that was very genuine and would serve the community, but also gets really to the core of what love and respect and relationship should be. So it was a joy to put together, and we've just launched season 2 actually in Australia as well.
Congratulations on that.
Mm.
And now what about you, Nick?
It was really in the wake of the success of Crazy Rich Asians. Unfortunately, it took that to make television wake up to the fact that there really wasn't Asian representation in that space. And we found a fantastic multi-generational Vietnamese family that had immigrated in. And it was such a great opportunity for us to, break down the nuances of the East and West, and a family that moved into Houston. And it was a very satisfying project to bring that to the screen.
That's awesome. Now, speaking of that, I would love to hear a little bit more about your guys' respective backgrounds in the TV space. So if anyone wants to start first, maybe Nick, if you want to take it.
Sure. About my bio?
Yeah.
I'm a longtime showrunner. I got my start doing some MTV shows as well. The show ran the MTV show Run's House back in the days. And went on to work at a production company for a number of years with a producer I'd worked with for some time, and headed up development. I was brought in by Wallen Chambers and Lionsgate to run HBO Max's House of Ho. And that brings us to where we are right now.
Incredible. And now what about you, KARINA?
Well, I've mainly worked in factual as a documentary producer director, doing all kinds of different stories. And I was a commissioning editor at the ABC for a while for Science Natural History. But I've had a very privileged career, I guess, in that I've been able to work for global networks and tell stories all around the world, and a lot with a science bent or a social issues bent. It's running a team here at Northern Pictures who are making content across the board really now.
Awesome. And what about you, Jacob?
Well, yeah, I've been doing this I've never done anything else really, 20 odd years. Started sort of the well-worn path at the BBC. I'm from the UK, worked there for 10 years, did the usual thing, made a lot of tea, worked for free. And then eventually came up through the ranks there. And really for the last, I've been here 13 years in Australia, always in a kind of series producer, series director, writer role, always in factual, always making stuff about sort of hopefully big ideas and big social issues. And yeah, just having still kind of pinching yourself that it's a job, that you get to just kind of peer into people's lives and get a chance to tell their story sort of on their behalf. I think it's kind of a bit of a secret, right? that we kind of get to do this. It's extraordinary. We're just very privileged, and it still feels like that now, which is exciting. I feel that probably more strongly now than I did when I started, because it's sort of you grow with that idea, and I still am amazed that people say yes, and then respecting their story, and it's great. It's a great job.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. And what about you, Ryan?
I started as an intern at MTV in '97, spent like 13 years there, and then bounced around a bit. Vice TV, a few other ones. And then I came to Left Field, did some science shows, and then History Channel, and then eventually Alone. And like Jacob was saying, you know, initially for me, it was getting in to do this world was to travel and to see what was out there. And but like Jacob said, it's like eventually like you start realizing it's the people you meet and the lives you get in, and all of a sudden you end up in these worlds that, you know, a guy from, you know, Western New Jersey, you know, doesn't have any place being. You know, all of a sudden you're with these amazing people and in cultures that you wouldn't normally get to experience, and you're kind of just thrust into it. And then it's your obligation to tell their story the best way you can and as honestly as you can.
Oh, that is so fascinating. Now, I'd love to know, going off of that, how do you guys decide, you know, who you're going to focus on when you're casting these shows? And also, do you feel a sense of responsibility in your work to kind of show different perspectives or show different forms of representation? Maybe Ryan, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, sure. If we're talking, I mean, every show is its own animal, right? And you've got to figure out what it is that you're trying to say. But specifically, if we're speaking about Alone, you know, we have, God, I think we've got something like 10,000 emails that we have to slowly keep getting through of folks that are interested in being on our show. You know, and there's so many different variables as to, you know, why we select the folks we do. But at the end of the day, it's really, you know, it's like, are you capable of doing the things that you say you can do? You know, are you capable of emoting on camera and giving us an honest story, you know, telling us your failures as well as your showing your successes, and really opening that door as to who you are. And that's what Alone is, right? Alone isn't about a monetary prize at all. You know, it's about what happens when you're alone. What does that bring up, you know, with your emotions and with your past, and then explaining that to the folks that are watching, right? Because there really is nobody around, and all of a sudden you have no choice but to start talking. We don't give them pads and paper, like they have to talk to the camera. So it's really about that. And if you were to look at Alone and in telling their stories, you can relate to every single character that we've put out there. And that's what we look for. We look for those really great stories and those folks that are honest with themselves and honest with the folks at home that are gonna tell the best story.
That is awesome. And now, you know, speaking of the last season of Alone, you know, Roland is out there in the wilderness for the longest that we've seen anybody out there, 100 days. What do you think this show is teaching us about what we're capable of as people?
I think it's really just, you know, I ask everybody who comes through, like, have you ever experienced this kind of time out there alone by yourself? And for the most part, you know, most folks haven't. You know, we've got phones and we've got families and we've got lives and we've got work and we've got all of these things. I think what it does is allows you to look back at yourself and realize what's really, really important, and allows us all to kind of watch that and find out for ourselves. It's a way for us all to do it through them, if that makes any sense. And I can quote so many different people that we've seen, because there's so many things that they say that stick with you. And I think they are teaching us so much about ourselves and in such a honest way that I don't know if a lot of us get a chance to witness that or feel that.
Absolutely. And now, moving over to you, Jacob, what about you when it comes to, you know, focusing on who you're going to cast for this show? And also, do you feel a sense of responsibility in your work to show different perspectives or show different forms of representation?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think I was thinking then, just talking about our first cameraman I worked with said to me at the time, he said, the people, everyone who runs towards the camera, you don't want. Everyone who runs away from the camera, those are the people you want. Now, that's not entirely true, but there's an element. I used to go out with him and make current affairs stuff, but there's an element with casting in that really it's not quite that simple. But in terms of the authenticity, Ryan was just talking about honesty, and I think the authenticity is the thing that you want. You want people to be exactly who they are, and you want them to represent you know, in terms of Australia here, you want them to represent that multicultural melting pot that we are. You want to have all those viewpoints because, you know, if we're going to tell these stories on behalf of people and they're going to connect with that audience, they have to look and sound like the audience. And we have an obligation for them to have that depth and that diversity across that. But I think that the binding principle is the authenticity and the honesty, because I would say this, wouldn't I? I think television is the most honest medium. I think you can see bullshit very quickly, and I think it's incredibly powerful. You know, I came up as a journalist and I got mocked for going to television by print journalists who said, oh, you're moving away from the honest journalism, you know, the proper journalism. Well, I always believe that television is the most honest, the most authentic, and it will show up bullshit, basically. And so I think you need people to be their most authentic and represent the audience. Yeah.
Absolutely. And now with Filthy Rich and Homeless, you know, you guys bring such an eye-opening look to important like social issues in Australia, from homelessness to drug use to the LGBTQ community. I was wondering if you could share how your show has, you know, potentially affected real social change in Australia.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. I mean, you never know when you start these things. You hope it will. You don't know, like, the ripple effect things have. You want to affect each individual who watches. You want to affect potential systemic change. But, you know, from SBS, who were the network that broadcast the series here, did a lot of research afterwards. And, you know, the stats came back that 2 out of 3 people who watched either changed their attitude towards people living with homelessness, volunteered their time, donated money. So it was quite a privilege to work on a show that actually, when people finished watching, they didn't just sit on their couch and watch the next show. They kind of got up and did something. And that's pretty exciting to be part of that. We kind of cast with that in mind as well. You know, we had people who could have influence in social media, but we also had people who had influence at the political table. So, you know, we had people who could actually affect change at a higher level. And we know that that happened after, because we made 3 series and each one kind of escalated in terms of its depth, I suppose, and the kind of messaging that was in there. And really by the end of it, we were talking, you know, we started off by making a series that was saying, hey guys, don't just walk past homeless people in the street, say hello, job done, series 1. To series 3, the government better start building some low-cost affordable housing and have wraparound social care. Otherwise, you know, we're doing nothing as a society. So I think that actually, and the audience are often ahead, and so we have to respect that and go with them. I think sometimes I think sometimes we underestimate how bold we can be with our storytelling, because actually I think we can push at a door that's ready to be pushed at, and what the research proved from those shows is the compassion and goodwill is out there, and that people are good, and that when they see a social issue like that, they want to move with it and provoke change off the back of it. Yeah. So it's gone are the days of worthy social issues. You know, they're actually about people's lives.
Absolutely. I think that is a beautiful thing to see. And now moving over to you, KARINA, you know, going back to the original question, you know, who do you decide to focus on when you're casting? How do you choose that? And do you feel a sense of responsibility to show different forms of representation?
Absolutely. And just picking up on what Jacob was saying, I think we're really lucky in Australia that we've got some broadcasters here who want to make shows that people watch, but also have change inherent in them and actions. And so, you know, we're pretty lucky in the way that we're able to make content that matters and has impact. And in some ways, this particular series, Love on the Spectrum, after Employable Me, which was a series about creating an attitudinal change in society and pathways for people with disabilities to get employment, you know, we're looking at that also for relationships and the mechanisms by which people can access those social services and create those things that don't exist in Australia. And to do that, casting people who were authentic, obviously, and sometimes I think that people with ASD, you know, you get a pretty honest approach to life in the way that people speak. Diversity of autism is so different and experienced. It's almost difficult that it is such a broad thing. But for us to represent the spectrum when you have some people who are highly verbal, others that are non-verbal, some people are incredibly social, others who are incredibly shy and can't maintain eye contact, and making sure that people felt like when they saw the spectrum represented in the show that they understood how diverse it was, because I think that we've been given these very fixed stereotypes by the good doctor and the genius, and through fiction. And so it was like, let's represent more of the experience of people with autism, so that autistic people are genuinely represented by telling their own stories. And I would say, interestingly, of course, it's really important for us to look at race and sexuality and all of these things as well. But we actually found a real struggle with people from different cultural backgrounds to talk about autism. It wasn't necessarily accepted. And we worked so hard to get representation. And I think that that is really interesting when you actually have cultural barriers to discussing these things, and wanting to make sure that the audience understands that this is something that is across society. But obviously you need to have willing participants, and when you've got families discouraging their members, our most important thing was do no harm. Make sure that we're always working with people who genuinely want to be on the show and are in there, and we know that they're robust enough to participate. And so, I guess that again is why we talk to thousands of people in casting shows like this.
That is incredible. And that is so, fascinating to hear about, like, the cultural barriers that you had to deal with. So, following making this first season, you're now on your second season. What do you hope that maybe people can take away in terms of, like, breaking down stigma, maybe so that, other people can feel more comfortable being themselves and expressing themselves in whatever identity there is?
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest thing initially was that there was a perception that people with autism, they don't have feelings, or that because they express themselves differently, that they're unemotional, and that they're not looking for love and relationships and belonging, because they may withdraw from society or not be understood. And that was our first thing, that we absolutely want to bust that myth, because autistic people are incredibly loving and generous, and like everybody, they all have different needs and different desires. And so I think that was, the big thing, giving a voice to autistic people to talk about how they feel, and therefore putting the storytelling. They decided how they were going to date, where they were going to go, what they wanted their process to be. And if they didn't want to film, they didn't have to be filmed. They were very much driving the storytelling. And so by allowing those people to tell their stories as individuals, rather than like finding that one person who represents what autism is, which would be absolutely impossible, just broadening society's outlook and actually getting people to understand. A lot of people who, autistic people, don't consider themselves disabled. They may talk about the supports or struggles that they have, like we all have, but just trying to destigmatize some of those ideas about autism is not an intellectual impairment, and it shouldn't be seen that way. And so trying to give voice to neurodiverse communities.
Absolutely, absolutely. Moving over to you, Nick, I'd love to hear about how you guys focus on casting, especially when it came to House of Ho. And again, if you feel any sense of responsibility to show these different types of perspectives in your work.
Absolutely. I mean, in casting for this show, we were going after an Asian family that was multi-generational and was affluent. That was, as I said, it was inspired by the success of Crazy Rich Asians at the time. I'm kind of, embarrassed to say that, because what it turned out to be is so much bigger and more layered than the wealth of it all, But when we found the family, the interesting part about making a docuseries about this Vietnamese immigrant family is the culture of their family was really shut in. Like the culture, even within their family, they're not accustomed to sharing with one another. They didn't have emotional conversations. They didn't air out their dirty laundry. I very early on was having, shooting some scenes, and a couple of the characters had a conversation that seemed relatively benign. And one turned to me, Judy Ho, one of our primary characters, and said, I haven't had a conversation like that with my mom in 30 years, and so for me as a showrunner, it was a really fascinating journey to earn their trust and really dig in and learn about them and be completely wide open, so that obviously we're not projecting any ideas about what being a Ho is or being Vietnamese is, of any of those different things. They really, jumping in, you make a show like this, where it's a docu-series and you're hoping to get all of those interesting events that happen in families, the fun and the laughter and the tears. And upon entering, I realized that the most difficult part was going to be working through that cultural barrier. And we managed to do it as we all gelled, and each of them started to realize that to be good at this, they had to really be brave and open up. And in doing so, it was interesting to see their relationships evolve and change. We had a love story that developed in the season of our show, and it acted like a kind of a hot air balloon. The love started to inspire everyone around them, the Judy and Nate in our story, and it kind of pushed the eldest son to open up and share more than he ever had. It inspired the youngest son, who is not one to really spend much time with the family. He re-entered the picture. It really turned into, I think all of us see that the type of TV that, where you're using real people and all of this, it turns out to be cathartic for them and therapeutic a lot of times. Working within a family like this, it very much did. And it's very interesting to see how that speeds everything up in their lives. And yeah, very interesting stuff.
Wow, that is amazing. And I got to ask, House of Ho is a show that arrives really at a very high point right now in Asian American representation in media, which is awesome. And with the rise of the Stop AAPI hate movement and things like that, what do you think that means for shows like House of Ho and beyond?
I think it's very important. We're so proud to have been a part of the timing of House of Ho. When we were in production, we weren't aware of any other shows in the States that were docu-series that had complete Asian casts. There now are a couple popping up, which is awesome. I think it's really important. Being close to this project has shown me how the community rallies around our family and our characters. They're all communicating. It's really been very helpful to elevate Asian voices, period. So ultimately, I think it's just about pushing through, and we're very excited at the notion of moving forward with our show into multiple seasons, and we really want to get into stories that are much more about the family dynamics, much more about the interpersonal, relatable parts of being a family, not just about being rich and Asian, but getting into it. So I think it's very healthy that we're starting to see Asians appear all over TV.
Absolutely. Now, I'd love to hear from you guys about if there's any moments from your show that has just really stuck with you and why. Maybe we start with Jacob.
Oh, geez. From the third series of Filthy Rich and Homeless?
Yeah.
Oh, look, geez, there's a few. It's kind of, I guess it's that whole spectrum. So there was a scene when one of the cast is begging on the street in Sydney, and he's just been ignored. And it's very simple. It's just very visceral. But he picks this moment where he goes, a guy just walked past and he was literally jangling the change in his pocket when he walked past me. And he goes, I've been that guy. I've been that guy. I've been the guy with jangling change in my pocket that's kept on walking. And just that very simple, but actually very layered and complex response to being immersed in that situation and realizing where you've come from, right? So there's that. And then at the other end, there's the moment when the Deputy Lord Mayor of Melbourne was spending time in a boarding house. I don't know what the equivalent would be in the States, but you know, like very low cost rental. And he met one of the hosts of the show, and I guess just his absolute realization that it wasn't enough just to experience this 10 days, that his whole life had changed, and from this point on he would be fighting the cause of homelessness. That was him done, you know, that's what he would be looking to do. And you see that in the show and you go, that's amazing, that's wonderful, that's definitely in, he's crying, that's incredible. But the reason I'm pointing it out is because he has. he didn't say it because he felt like it in the moment. He left that show. He texted me 2 days ago to tell me about his latest venture, that he's just signed this deal with all these guys about trying to push for low-cost affordable housing in Melbourne. And he says, just to let you know, mate, I'm still there. I'm still doing it, you know, and that was 2 years ago. And so, yeah, for totally different reasons, those two moments, I think.
Wow, yeah. Very, very powerful. What about you, Ryan?
I think there's so many. If you're versed in the show, there's a guy named Larry Roberts. And Larry, I think one of my favorite people and favorite characters, because he was so honest. He threw everything out there and he didn't hold back. And when he went out, because he was out there twice, we did 2 shows with Larry. Larry went out there season 2, and then there was a redemption series, quote unquote, and season 5. And Larry, when he first went out there, he hated his job. He didn't want to go back to it. He was, you know, just working nonstop. And this was hopefully going to fix him. And then through this whole ride with them and everything that he experienced out there, kind of brought him back to life with his family. Like, you know, like how much he loved his wife and how much he loved his children and you know, if you've seen the episodes, it's really, really amazing. But he was kind of broken, right? When he came out of season 2, he was really, really broken because he didn't win. And again, we always say that's not what it's about. But season 5, he went into it again, I think with every plan to win. And at some point, that experience, that being alone, that living by yourself, it fixed him. He didn't have all the pressure on him anymore to win. He didn't have the pressure on him that, you know, the world was awful and he hated his job. Like he kind of came to terms with everything, right? It was like this, like if you had to have one thing all the way over here of no one and all the little pain in the ass things that mess up your life, the guy who gives you the middle finger and you're like, I didn't do anything. He'll take all of those things because family and life and being okay with yourself is so important to so many of us. And I think when we're, you know, trying to keep up with the Joneses, you know, you lose sight of that. You know, somebody this season said, what was it? Money is what we give up our lives for, you know, and there's truth to it, right? And these folks are kind of testing those waters and seeing what's out there and finding that really, you know, home is where the heart is and family is the most important thing in the world. And it sometimes takes a lot of bad things for you to realize how important that is.
Wow. Yeah. Just, wow. That is deep. Just, you know, find out what's important, you know, that is great. Wow. What about you, KARINA? Have you had any favorite moments over the course of the season that just really stick with you, and why?
Too many, definitely too many. One of the things that we did in this show was that we had not just single people going on dates, we also showed couples. And the final episode in series 1, we just had the most unbelievably beautiful, emotional engagement surprise, which was just fabulous. Watch out for season 2, should I say. But look, I just, even the experience of watching when we had autistic people going on dates and the way they discussed their own identity and their sense of self. And I remember Olivia, who was one of the girls who went on a date, and she's sitting there at a cafe talking to a guy, and he's, you know, they're talking about their love of amateur dramatics and how he should come and join her theatre, but it's a disability theatre. So she says, well, you wouldn't be able to join because it's a disability theatre. And he's like, oh, but you know, I have a disability, I have autism, and she's, or Asperger's, as he referred to himself. And then she was like, oh, do you? And he's like, but what do you have? And she said, she's like, well, I do too. And he's like, but you don't look autistic. And she's like, well, how can you look autistic? And even autistic people discussing, you know, the way their identity, their sense of self, and allowing those conversations to play out instead of through the neurotypical lens of gazing and analysing and having experts come in and tell us, you know, some medical model of this. You know, how do people unpack their identity? I think is fascinating. And then how forward people like to be with that, and then how they want to, and then the issues of disclosure as well, I think are really interesting, because we're all coming out now. We're all unpacking ourselves as, I'm this, I'm that, this is my marginalized thing, or this is my invisible whatever that you know, makes me different. And I think that it's really interesting that we're at this moment where we are forcing an amount of disclosure, which it's even interesting as a program maker to put yourself in that situation of what kind of disclosures the media is kind of forcing on us, because we have such a hothouse talking about how to be inclusive, how to bring everybody on board, how to deal with diversity. Don't have the answers, but I love those conversations about identity.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's so great to watch your show and see those conversations happening, because I think they're not conversations we always have. So you're really able to learn something new just, you know, just watching it. I'd love to move over to you, Nick, and hear about, you know, if there's any favorite moments from your series that really stick with you and why.
Sure. You know, when I came on as a showrunner for this, and we had this beautiful family, and mom and dad had come over from Vietnam, and then they had kids, and they had 3 kids, and the oldest is Judy, and she's 40, and had recently announced her divorce, which in their family, you know, is in that culture is a really big deal, you know, to come out and have the courage to do away with the marriage that is not working and move on to something else. But as we were entering the season, you know, Judy was single. You know, she had told you know, everyone she was now kind of working through a divorce, and everyone wanted to know if she was dating, and her family wanted to know, and her community and friends. And she just across the board told everybody that no, you know, I'm single, and she didn't want to let anyone in on that part of her life. As we got moving, you know, episodes 1 and 2, I was under a lot of pressure to kind of get to the bottom of what her dating was all about, and did she want to be dating, and did she want to get out and do that? And at about episode 2, when she started to get comfortable, she pulled me aside and she's like, I'm not dating because I'm in love. And I was like, that would have been great to know, you know, 6 weeks ago. But she says, no, I'm in love, and I don't know how you want to handle this, but I actually have fallen in love with a doctor that's in my community of friends, and it's so complicated that it's something I would never tell my family. Like, my Vietnamese mother would not know how to handle this information. And she's like, I swear to God, if it hadn't have been for this show that I kind of found myself in, she said, I would have kept this secret for another 10 years. And so, you know, I talked to this lucky guy that had fallen in love with her, and we figured out a way. And for all of us storytellers on this Zoom, it's like, imagine kind of telling a story where you have this family that is very slowly learning how to like come out, as you know, and we're on a production timeline, and those two things don't gel so well. So we had these major stories starting to emerge, starting with hers. And so in episode 3, we figured out a way to tell that story where, you know, you think she's single moving in through 1 and 2. And then, and it really set the tone for our storytelling for the remaining of the season, because we were able to actually speak to the fact that she was incapable of being honest with her family. And it wasn't until she was in front of the camera, and she was always a reluctant participant, by the way. It was her much more outgoing brother that actually kind of brought the opportunity to the family and really talked everyone into it. And she originally was told this, her brother said, this is about me, actually. They just might want to see you in the background, you know? And she said, well, okay, because she's just such an A student in life. But it was that moment where she let me into that love affair. And it was kind of a moment where this poor guy, Nate, who is a doctor and had no desire to really be on television, found himself in a place where it's like, my options are to live my truth right now and step to Judy's side, or she could just tell speed dating stories on a television show. And it was that moment that really cracked open the family, and the stories just started to kind of do that thing where they started to emerge. Yeah, it was a pretty beautiful thing.
Wow, it sounds like it was a therapeutic experience to be on that show. Everything's coming out into the open. Everyone's getting closer. I love that. Wow. Now, I would love to talk a little bit about the returning seasons of Love on the Spectrum and Alone. Those are coming back for new seasons. What can you kind of tease about that? Maybe Ryan, you want to share a little bit?
Sure. We shot at a location called Choco Lake in BC. Incredibly beautiful place. We've been lots of really beautiful places, but I've never seen a place as pristine and pure as this. Everything from I mean, you could drink the water right out of the lake. It's incredible. The people were incredible. The culture is incredible. The amount of grizzly bears is incredible. They are everywhere. We knew there would be a few, but I don't think we realized that every single person would have their encounter with them. So that's a pretty big thing. Heavy winds. Some really heartbreaking tap outs and extractions. A really interesting, just lots of really interesting stories. Again, every year it's different, but you know, we really were able to dig in with these folks, and they were very honest with their with the things they were going through and the things they were going through at home. And I think there's a ton of takeaway for all of us that are watching these folks live completely by themselves, completely alone, and yet there's millions of us watching them. I think, I don't know, it's just really pure on a lot of levels, and terrifying in others, so.
And now, of course, no spoilers, but I gotta ask, I mean, especially in the last season, you know, you had a lot of women making it to the end, but not quite. So what do you think it will take to see a woman, you know, take home the win over the course of this series?
It's a good question, because it, you know, at this point it should have happened by now, because I think the women are just as strong as the men, mentally extremely strong. A lot of it just comes down to luck of the draw of where they could get positioned. It is, we do like a triple blind like site pick. It's like, you know, we pick fortune cookies, and that's a name or it's a number, and then they have to pick a rock of that corresponding number, and then they have to pick something out of a hat. So it's a complete draw as to their locations, and that location, you know, if you're on the windy side of the lake, you know, it's, you know, and you're getting battered by wind for, you know, 60 days straight, you know, that's going to absorb a lot of your heat and your resources, which means you've got to cut more firewood, you know, and if the deer aren't coming down to that location, that'll affect you. You know, you lose your gill net. There's so many reasons as to why some people make it and some people don't. I don't think it's a male-female thing. I think it's luck of the draw, because if you look at the female participants that have been on the show, they are equally, if not stronger than a lot of the men. So I think, I don't know, you'll have to wait and see what happens this season.
And I mean, from working on this show for so many seasons, do you feel like there's like something that you've learned that like if you were thrown in this situation, you'd be like, oh yeah, I got this?
Yeah, I know how to push the button and get somebody to come and get me. No, I think there's, we all talk about it, all the producers that are both in the field and everybody who puts together the show. And, you know, it's, do we have enough institutional knowledge to do what these incredibly knowledgeable people can do? And I don't think we hold a candle to how capable these folks are, male or female. I think I would be lucky to have half the knowledge or a quarter of the knowledge of any of these folks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now what about you, KARINA, for this new season of Love on the Spectrum? What can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, we've just started screening on ABC. So episode 2 went to air last night. We have some returning characters who are much loved that people have been thrilled to see come back. We have some new characters, and it's great in that we've been talking about bisexuality and pansexuality and asexuality, and really doing some news stories, people dating neurotypical people dating neurodivergent people. But I think that the joy in this series in particular is that the amount of love that is found, and that we're going deeper and deeper, and we're going beyond first dates to second dates to third dates, and the series ends with a wedding. So it's been a massive joy. It's such a huge payoff. So yes, but you know, probably like Ryan, I haven't learned anything from the show because I'm still single. Maybe because the bar's set so high, because I know what the perfect date needs to look like. Yeah, so it's fun though.
Absolutely. You know, I'm also curious, you know, I know that there are a lot of TikTok communities that are, you know, people talking about their disabilities or their autism or things like that. Is that anything that you guys have started tapping into, like internet communities?
Well, I mean, I guess that it's interesting when you're a conduit with your show almost becomes the umbrella by which things kind of gather. And once you've got your Twitter handles and your hashtags and things like that, people build their own communities, and we find that builds out. I mean, we did a lot of consulting with the community when we made the show, but in some ways, you know, this is the joy of the show. You get these audiences, and they come together, and maybe they're disparate, but they connect, and then they set off on their own journey, and they have their own commonalities. And there's been some wonderful podcasts and groups and whatever, but we let them have their life after broadcast kind of moments rather than trying to curate them or do anything for them. But obviously, you know, there's been some really interesting connections made with our central characters from people around the world as well. So, you know, managing them and their expectations and how they can make that into a healthy, sustainable, encouraging thing, as well as, I guess, our duty of care is really with the participants of the show.
Absolutely. And now I'd love to hear from you guys. What's something that you've learned from working on your show and something that you hope people take away from it? Maybe Jacob, if you want to start.
What did I learn? I think I learned from a program making point of view to back ourselves with our boldness of what we make, because as I think I said earlier, I think the audience are often more ready than we realize, and able to deal with big ideas and big social issues. Look, I hope what people actually took away was that it wasn't really about the 5 people we put in and out on the streets. It was actually about people experiencing homelessness, and that as a society, if you know, we really need to start taking these things seriously. I mean, Australia is one of the richest countries on earth, and the homeless numbers are increasing. You know, what are we doing? I think that if people can understand that, as glib as it sounds, you know, guess what? They're not homeless people. They're people who are experiencing homelessness. You know, they're people like all of us who things have gone wrong in their life, always with a backdrop of trauma, but things have gone wrong. It's not their fault, and they've ended up in the situation they've ended up, and we all have a responsibility to do something about it.
Definitely. And Nick, do you want to take it?
So for me, it was a real education as an American and a former, you know, military person myself, a veteran. It was a real education on, you know, Vietnamese culture in America, you know, and how the implications of the war in Vietnam and how it drove, you know, people out of it, and families were scattering to save their lives and lives of their kids. And, you know, the United States kind of opened the gates for a period of time, and they came in and tried their best to assimilate. And I realized just how difficult that whole process was, and these amazing communities that would form within our country and really build out support systems and things like the one that I was in Houston. I mean, it's amazing, the family and community support that they would give one another. In the case of the patriarch of our show, he came over with nothing, and, you know, saved up some money, and you know, they got themselves, they purchased, you know, small business and welcomed their cousins and stuff to work in it, you know, and then it was, you know, bought another business, and we're able to employ some others, and it just built and built and built. But it was always about helping others to sustain their families, you know. And we were speaking about Asian hate and those different unfortunate things that we've been seeing lately. But these communities and these people really really support each other in a kind of an amazing way. I realized, though, as an American, I didn't know really half the story. The way that the books are written just on the Vietnam War and all of that. Anyway, there's a lot. My takeaway is there's a lot for me to expose my kids to. Shows like mine are entertainment, but they are important in the sense that if you watch our show, you'll learn some of those things. There's good takeaway in that, and that's important. It truly is a building block for this group to build out, and that's, I think, the most important conversation we're having, or one of them that we're having right now. KARINA said this in a nice way. We're all unpacking, and globally, we're all unpacking. We're kind of understanding. People are accepting so many things about themselves that they never have. I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I'm constantly educated on a daily basis about all things, pronouns and this and that, but you know, race and culture. And anyway, it's important. That's my takeaway, is that giving one little thing to the pop culture landscape, and the beauty of it is that it exposes people to a bit more of the story, and help support that community so that it becomes just normal to see, in this case, Asians on television in this way. And we can start getting away from just seeing the rich ones, you know, just seeing those. It's just, anyway, let's make these things normal.
Yes, that is what we love to see. Moving over to you, KARINA, again, if you have anything that you've learned from working on your show and what you hope people take away from it.
Well, look, I learned a ridiculous amount, and I just feel like maybe it's the times, maybe it's having gone through coronavirus and or the way that we've been separated, but we've also come together. I just have, you know, a lens of kindness and listening. And I think as producers, creating space for people to tell their stories has just become so imperative. And I was making another series at the same time as this, which was about domestic abuse. And so one of the things I learned was balance. To walk from one edit suite to the next was really gratifying, to go from something really hard and difficult and important to something that was joyful and kind and loving, and, you know, the whole of the human experience kind of encapsulated in the work, and creating that balance so that you can reflect on both those situations, that, you know, the joys of love and the pain of love, and where things end up in between. But yeah, I think as producers, I'm really lucky. I work with a director, Ian O'Cleary, whose voice you hear on screen for Love on the Spectrum, and the way that he's brought his humanity to this show. And I just love the fact that the space is given for things to unfold. As producers, take your hand off it and let it be. And obviously, you know, things like Alone do this to such an amazing extent, but it's also in the edit. It's the way that we choose to, you know, mix the music, and where you choose to drop in your narration and things like that. I think that the audience respects it when we give them the space to feel as well, rather than always leading them. And so that's something that I think that I'm becoming more conscious of with our program making.
Oh yes, absolutely. I love that. You know, just kind of letting the viewers follow along with what your subjects are leading you with, you know, versus having to produce everything and make it all, you know, just tell them the true authentic story, which I think is the thing a lot of you guys have mentioned, the authentic, you know, subjects that you're following. Going back to you, Ryan, anything you've learned from working on your show and what you hope people take away from it?
Yeah, I think it's like, I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. I think it's that anybody and everybody is capable of more than they think they are. And sometimes you just need to test yourself a little bit in whatever the forum is. And I think what Alone does, you know, it's not a fast-paced show, but it's an introspective show. And I think it reminds people that you can get away from your phones, and we can get away from our computers, and we can find our backyards exciting again. And I think that's what's great about the series. And that's the takeaway I take away from it. And from the folks that, you know, I speak to, you know, even my neighbors and their kids, you know, all of those kids, you know, they're doing the things that, you know, that Alan Kay did, you know, in season 1, and they're trying to do bow drills, and, you know, they've been in my front yard and you know, trying to do all those things, you know, and we're building towers and stuff like, and that's just the local people, the local fathers and moms, and I don't know, I hope it makes everything simple again, I guess, is what it all comes down to, because there's a lot of complex things happening that sometimes it's okay to take a step back.
Yeah, absolutely. Remembering what's important. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much. This was such a wonderful conversation. You know, best of luck to all of you in the awards. And I want to thank everyone who's been watching. Best of luck to all the nominees. And please tune in and watch the 2021 Rockie Awards live streaming on YouTube, Tuesday, June 15th at 3:00 p.m. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.